you guys, and welcome to Dog Hugs. So glad to see you today. That's right, Spider. You know what? Let's get Spider started on his busy box. If you've watched the show before, you've seen that up here, we've got a whole basket of little towels. Each one has a treat. And so Spider gets busy with that. So let's get him going with a busy box. Go ahead, get that one, Spider. Attaboy. He'll be back very soon. Good boy, go get it. You got to go get that one. He wants the whole box, but he's only getting the one. All right. Well, I'm really excited to share with you a wonderful. Oh, Spider is already back. All right. You got to go get that towel, buddy. There you go. Attaboy. He's on it. Look at that. He is so on it. He'll be back. So we have a really special guest today. I'm going to share with you Gwen Bortner in a moment. We know each other from heroic public speaking, which if you watched the show before, you've heard me talk about, but it's a great community of public speakers. And as part of our pledge is we can do more together than we can alone. So I want to introduce Gwen to you, a good friend of mine, Gwen Bortner, who you'll meet in a moment. And she's always been interested in a wide variety of things. You know, originally she planned on being a math teacher, but then her immediate future took a different path when she discovered computer programming. You know, back in the early 1980s, as if you're old enough as I am, when PCs were a novelty and the hottest technology was dial-up. Remember that sound? So that led to a decade and a half spanning from those first years of dialogue up to the early stages of wireless, during which she ran her own consulting company, worked as a consultant for Ernst & Young, ran the IT department for a phone company with clients that ranged from Sprint to a machine shop supplying high-tech wheelchair parts to the largest international distributor of bull semen. That's Gwen. From there, she eventually made the logical and obvious transition into professional knitwear designer and instructor on the national teaching circuit before transitioning 15 years later to a consultant and speaker, bringing her breadth of operational and instructional experience to helping businesses succeed. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And throughout this very career, she's also been the interim executive director for the National Needle Arts Association, the project manager for the Western Jurisdiction for United Methodist Church, virtual part-time COO for a number of small businesses across industries, and president of several nonprofit boards. And just to mix things up a little bit more, she's also been a professional ski instructor. So let's bring on my good friend, Gwen Bortner. Welcome, Gwen. Really
Hi, Larry.
You're here on the show. Great. Who's that in the background?
That is Miss Zephyrine. She is doing what she always does, which is hanging out on her dog bed.
She looks like a champion there.
She is. She's still conscious, but it's just barely at this point. we're let me know if the snoring gets too loud, because sometimes it does.
So tell us about Zeph.
So Zephyrine just turned 9 years old.
Happy birthday, big girl.
She had a good birthday, and 9 is pretty old for a Great Dane, and she's actually the oldest Great Dane I've had. My other Great Danes, I've had other Great Danes, didn't quite make it to 9. She is a little bit tiny. You can't really tell from this picture, but she's actually tiny for her breed. We call her a petite Dane instead of a Great Dane.
She's great. We never heard of her before.
Yeah, well, and we kind of joke that she's not that great.
A pretty great.
Yeah. but she is a blue color. She's gotten very gray in her
Yeah.
face over time.
Yes. Yeah,
But she's a beautiful blue color, and whenever we walk her anywhere, people are like, "Oh, she's just gorgeous. She's so pretty." And so we tease her about being a pretty girl.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, we think of dogs as being in packs and teams, and I know you want to share with folks today, and I would love for you to share with folks about some wisdom you have about our as humans being in packs, being in teams, and being able to play better, play well together.
Yeah, I am such a big fan of what's on the back of your T-shirt, and of course I have one just like it.
Yes.
If you would have warned me, we could have coordinated.
Oh,
we could have been matching set.
but
I love that we do more together than we can alone. I'm such a huge fan of that. But working together is not always easy. It's there's always challenges because we are all so unique. And so one of the things that I've been focusing on in the last few years is working with work groups and managers on how to be more effective in their communication and understanding all of the elements that come in to the equation as they're working together.
So you can help me communicate more effectively, i.e., understand and be understood.
I try. Let's say that. Okay, I don't want to overstep what my capabilities are, but I do. But
You're
I do
very
try.
modest, my friend.
Well, I don't want to get stuck on something I can't.
Right.
that I can't actually accomplish. But it's interesting because I shared with you at one point the concept of the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you, which I actually very much believe in from my own philosophical and religious background. But in communication, that's not always best. Because when we because when we communicate, we tend to assume that everyone communicates and works in the way that we communicate and the way that we work.
Do unto others as I would have you do unto me means I want you to communicate with me the same way I want to be communicated with. But that might not work for you, or vice versa.
Exactly. And the way I work may not be the way that you work. And even though we'll get to the same goal, we'll just take a different path, in getting there. And getting an understanding of that is what one of my trainings is all about, is understanding what some of our natural preferences are, how we can build capacity, and most importantly, understanding what I prefer, not so that you learn how to do it the way I want you to do it, but to understand how my preferences are going to affect me communicating with you, and what are your preferences, and how do I need to modify my behavior to better communicate with you.
So if I'm really on my game, that means I'm not trying to change you to do it my way. It means I'm trying to understand what your way is and be so self-aware as I frankly just understand what my way is and say, hey, this is what I need. I think is this what you need? And we have an open enough communication that we can say, yeah, that works. No, that doesn't work. Here's what would work better.
Exactly. And when work groups do the training together, that they also start getting some common language that they can share to say, oh, you're being way too experted again.
Right.
Right. Without having to go through all of the details and sometimes the emotional trauma. Instead, it's just like, oh yeah, okay, you're recognizing that's what I'm doing, and now you saying that helps me remember that's what I'm doing. And that it in some cases can be problematic. In other cases, it's perfectly wonderful. There is no right or wrong answer. There are just better answers in each situation.
I like that. Thank you. That really helps take the edge off of me of having to do it right.
No, there's lots of right answers, but sometimes an answer may be better than another in a given
Fair enough.
situation.
Yeah. So this is about, as I understand it, knowing personality types.
It is. It's based on the work of Carl Jung, which a lot of people associate with Myers-Briggs, because Myers-Briggs is the brand that got very popular for Carl Jung's work. The example I use is it's kind of like Kleenex. When you ask for Kleenex, you actually don't care if it's Kleenex brand Kleenex. What you really want is a facial tissue. You're not going to say, I need to put my nose. Oh, that's not actually Kleenex brand. Don't give me that.
Yeah. So, folks, Carl Jung, he was a psychologist, and he really wise man. And I don't mean that in a wise guy kind of way, but he really had a lot of wisdom, and I think understood people really well. And then you mentioned Myers-Briggs. If, as I understand it, it's a personality index. It's a personality test.
Yeah, it's a personality assessment, but there's a lot of things that actually come out of Carl Jung's work that talk about those kind of the four major dimensions that we associate.
Yeah, and what you call types.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what you do, Gwen, is you're a certified type coach.
Yeah, Type Coach is also a brand. Like Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
And their specific is focused on the communication piece and helping work groups become more effective, understanding where we communicate in a way so that we can be more effective in our day-to-day interactions and work activities.
So that we can become better work groups, have some real greatness in that. Okay,
absolutely.
Great. Well, let's get right into the types now.
All right. So typically the first that we always start with is introvert, extrovert. And a lot, it's the one that everyone is most familiar with from, just kind of casual conversation. We hear people, reference those terms a lot. The interesting thing is that it's getting adjusted, but for a long time, introvert and extrovert was a little bit not well described. It really is about your energy. So where you get your energy, and it's also about how you process your thoughts, and what is your primary thought processing mechanism. So when we think of introvert and extrovert, introverts tend to process internally, right? Which makes sense, the intro, and extroverts tend to process externally, meaning verbally.
Oh.
So one of the challenges with an introvert-extrovert dynamic in a workplace scenario, for example, is if you're an extrovert like I am, talking to an introvert, which I think you tend to fall maybe a little bit more on the introvert side.
As a writer, I tend to spend a lot of time in solitude.
So it would be easy for me to want to fill any silence with words, because extroverts get very uncomfortable with the silence.
Yeah.
But introverts need the silence to actually process their thoughts. And so introverts process everything inside, where extroverts, we actually often don't know what we're thinking until we hear it from our mouths.
So you hear it the same time I hear it.
Exactly, which can be a good thing and can be a bad thing. But
ready, fire, aim.
it kind of goes that way. And so extroverts will often just need to talk through a whole lot of stuff before they get to what the final idea is.
Interesting. Wow.
Where introverts, most of the time, what they say is the final idea.
Yeah, because I've processed it, and now all I have to do is verbalize it and I'm halting on purpose to indicate that I'm processing as I'm doing it. And I will verbalize it in what seems like a final draft.
That is exactly it.
Yeah.
That is exactly it. So there's a lot of dynamics related to introvert and extrovert that happen within a work group environment. What happens in meetings, what happens in one-on-one sessions, how people process new ideas, all of those things play into that.
Beautiful. Let's go on to the next pair.
All right, so the next pair is sensor or sensing and intuitive.
Right.
And the problem with sensing and intuitive is how we think about data. Okay, and so sensors or sensings tend to be much more focused on the present, or the past sometimes, and data. So much more, I would call it tactical, trying to work out logistics and tactics and those kinds
Yeah.
of things. Where intuitives are those big picture thinkers, right?
Yeah.
And the visionaries and the ones that are always talking about the possibilities and what could happen. And when you start going into details, they're like, yeah, don't bother me with details. Just go make that happen. You know, go solve that.
Don't bother me, kid.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you have a work group that is too much of one or the other, you're actually missing a really important element. If you have all intuitives, often they really struggle in getting things done because no one's focusing on the logistics, the tactical stuff. If you have a group that's mostly all sensors or sensing, you have the opposite problem that we never actually innovate. We just keep doing it the same way all the time, you know, because we don't think about the future. If it's working, you know, if it's not broken, don't fix it, you know, kind of a thing.
Since what I know from my own life is my profession, my whole life, I've been a writer and I've been a producer, and they seem like opposites in a way. That the producer is the one who does more of what you would call maybe censor, does those logistics. And the writer is that intuitive, the one who has those creative ideas. And they need to work together. And I admire those people who are pure one of the other. And I've never been that person. I've always been able to have that hybrid. So hearing this dichotomy, hearing this pairing, helps me understand how I need, at least within myself, both pairs. And then on a team, I would love to attract what I am not focusing on this project and understand how to work with that person.
Yeah, because that's the trick is if you are an intuitive, you'll often turn off when the sensor starts giving lots of details. And it's like, no, you need to be paying attention. If you're a sensor, you often want to give too many details to the intuitives, right? So it's that balance.
That is really helpful. Yeah, great tool in the toolbox here. Let's go into the next pair.
So the next pair is thinker and feeler. And this is how we make decisions. Now, in all cases, whether we're talking about you know, introvert, extrovert, sensing, intuitive, any of these pairs, it's important to know that we tend to have a preference, but it doesn't mean that we don't do the other. Almost all of us will do some amount of the other, and we can build capacity, meaning we can work to do more of the other. But when we're talking about it in this format, we're really talking about what is our preference, what is our natural tendency. And so thinker and decision and feeler is about where will we go to first when we think about decisions, right? So I happen to be a thinker that's nearly off the scale. These are all sit generally on a bell curve. And
we're not completely one or completely the other, that we tend to be somewhere a mix in the
somewhere near the middle. We tend to fall on one side of the middle or the other, but most are nearer the middle, like you would typically see in a you know, grading bell curve or any sort of bell curve kind of distribution.
Yeah. That's nice to hear that I'm not one or the other, or just some. Yeah, that I've got some of each, and
you've got some of each. Now, in years ago, I had a big test, and it came out that I almost have no feeler. I am almost all thinker. Yeah.
Wow. And yet you're such an artist.
Well, and that's the interesting thing is I approach my artistry logically. I don't approach it emotionally. And that's the difference between the thinker and the feeler. The thinker first goes to logic. They will argue a point if they're having a discussion in a logic sort of fashion. We like pros and cons. If you give me all upside, I don't trust it because there's always a downside. So that's a thinker kind of behavior. The feeler side says, I want to think about how this is going to affect people and the emotional response that this decision is going to have.
Yeah,
now, it's really not that I don't think about the people.
Yeah.
I just don't think about them first. I think about the logic first. And feelers don't, it's not saying you're not logical. It's saying I start with people first. Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And so
we make our decisions.
But this is another one that there's not a right or wrong answer. Both are really important to have in when you're working with groups of people, because if you only have thinkers, they do not spend much effort or time around the people piece of a decision. If you only have feelers, they only do the people piece of the decision and don't spend very much time on what are the what we would call the logical arguments from it. So having a mix in a conversation is really useful because each will bring up the other side.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, bringing up the other side, on the other hand, I would imagine if there's too much of a split on a team, might not come to any decision.
It's possible. That always comes into a different kind of dynamic of has your team developed a good dynamic of being able to be in conflict, what I call productive conflict.
Yes.
And have a good argument. And is there a mechanism at some point for someone to make a decision?
That makes sense. That we've built up enough in our trust bank account, as
exactly
say, and yet trust each other. And there's a protocol or a system if other people need that frame to ultimately make a decision.
Yeah.
A single decision in some cases.
Right. Exactly. Right. But generally, the conversation is so much richer if you've got this mix.
Yeah, and it leads us to a richer outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah, to really get to that work group greatness.
Yeah.
Effective communication. Great. All right, let's go on to our fourth and final pairing.
So the fourth and final pairing, the official terms I don't like very much because over time they have they've gotten kind of value judgments, which I don't really want because back to the same. There's not a good or a bad in this, but the technical terms are judger and perceiver. But judger sounds judgmental, and perceiver sounds perceptive. And generally, we assume judgmental is bad and perceptive is good, but that's not really what it means. So I like to use the term structure for the judgers and deadline for the perceivers.
Yes.
So the judgers or the structure folks approach their time, approach their projects very systematically. And so the way you can think about it is breaking up a project. If you've got 6 weeks, you break it up into 1 week increments, and you get the first 6 done in the first week, and the second, and very organized, very systematic. And typically, not always, but typically, the structure people will also finish before the deadline. If the deadline is here, it's we're not right against it. It's a day or two, depending on kind of what the scope is, because they're leaving space for things to go awry because they think about all of that ahead of time. The deadline driven people, or what we would typically call perceivers, actually start the project at the same time everybody else does, but they don't start it in the same consistent, I'm going to get a 1/6 of it done, a 1/6 of it done. They think about it a little bit, and then it just kind of processes in the background, and then it's like something triggers it. Oh, I should, and they'll do a little bit, and then that just processes. As the deadline gets closer and closer, all of a sudden, that's when we get all sorts of activity going on, and that it will become very, very busy. up till the deadline. They will hit the deadline, but they will hit the deadline.
You know, busted. When I was writing this one, you know, this has got, what, 118 tricks in it. And so, you know, it's like writing each trick one at a time. It's like, so I tried parsing it. I'm going to do so many tricks a day, so many tricks a week, you know, this kind of thing. I couldn't do it.
I was going to say, I'm guessing based on your response that is not how that happened.
It did not happen, you know, and it was agony, you know. And so what I finally had to do was say, okay, everything else just is disappearing, and I've got to focus, you know. Another author wrote a book about writing, calling it Bird by Bird. Annie Lamott. And she had to do a similar thing. Instead of writing dog tricks, she had to write a book on birds. Well, how do you write a book on birds? One bird at a time, bird by bird.
Yep.
And so, you know, I began, you know, trying it, you know, her way, and it was hard. So I am definitely, you know, on your dichotomy, on your deadline side here.
Yeah.
And I had to figure out a way to do it, because it's not something you can cram for. It had to be, yeah.
But I find people who are deadline driven, my husband is this way, that you still have an intuitive sense of when you actually have to go into high gear.
Yeah.
To get it done. And like if you need 3 weeks of high gear, you give yourself 3 weeks and you do it. If it's 3 hours of high gear, it's 3 hours, you know. But the deadline is the deadline, and so long as you meet it, you're good.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is really excellent. It helps me understand, you know, these dichotomies about how I am and how I can be a better communicator, a better team member, and also for building that bridge of teamwork and communication among my team members.
Right.
Is there a way we can take a test to find out who we are and how we can,
Yeah, so there are all sorts of tests online. The one that I use and recommend that I'm certified for is Type Coach, which can be found at typecoach.com.
Yeah.
And they have a whole bunch of tools, and that's part of the reason why I particularly liked their methodology. Is with it, they allow you to be able to see what the other types are. They also have coaching, they have some training. There's all sorts of things that you can opt into as part of it. The trick with any of these, when we're talking about preference, is if it's not obvious to you whenever they ask, you know, they always ask questions about would you do this or would you do that, or rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. If you're not sure, think back to about your junior high self. Because between junior high and high school, our preferences are pretty well established, but we haven't built as much capacity yet. So often as we become adults, you know, when they become closer to your and my age, we've built a lot of capacity over time to do the other side of our preference. And it becomes less obvious.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's really helpful. Now, we're going to get a coupon code, and we'll put it down in the Facebook chat. So folks, if you're interested in this, you'll be able to get that coupon code for that. That's really great. All right, Gwen, let's talk some more about dogs.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm looking at mine.
How's Zeph doing over there? Oh yeah.
You can't see her, but her little paw is moving. She's dreaming.
That's really sweet.
There's a little, and I was laughing because I was thinking, yeah. So I've got the introvert, and you've got the extrovert.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well said.
Mine almost never says anything. And yours is like, hello, I want to be a part. I want to be with everybody.
Well, that's really interesting. There's a school of thought called Imago, where we are attracted sometimes to our opposites.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why you're with Zeph and I'm with Spider. You've heard him barking on the other side of the door. Well, he's been exiled for a little while. He's quiet enough where it's time for him to come back in. We'll see if he's going to go. So while I go get Spider, I would love if you share for a moment, Gwen, about a shelter or rescue organization that you'd like to give a shout out to.
So my favorite rescue organizations are a little more general, and that is breed-specific rescue organizations, because so often we like to have particular animals. Like I like my Great Danes, but I've found that there's so many opportunities where Great Danes are really cute puppies. Oh my gosh, they are the cutest thing ever. But then all of a sudden they are huge, and so people give them up. And and when we adopt and when we get an animal, it should be an animal for life. Yeah. And so I'm very much about breed-based rescues, because I know almost every breed has a rescue organization, somewhere.
Really true. Yeah.
So you can just look it up on on the internet, and there's almost always a national one, and often you can find one within your region, that matches it as well. So I worked with a Great Dane rescue organization with my previous Great Dane. She was a foster mama.
Nice.
She was very, very gregarious. She was extremely smart, very well behaved, and she was a great foster mom for Great Danes that needed to get rehomed and often needed a little adjustment in their behavior. And she was very good at helping them.
She would be the dog in your home who would somehow communicate to the other dogs.
Yeah.
This is how it works here, and you're in a safe, cool place.
Yep.
That's nice. That's really nice. Well, my first dog as a grown-up was from a breeds-specific rescue organization. It was a golden retriever from Golden Retriever Rescue, which is my favorite acronym.
That's so awesome.
GRR. Yeah.
That is so awesome.
Higgins. And this book, Training the Best Dog Ever, was dedicated to him and to my parents. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Gwen, this show is also about gratitude and blessing. And is there somebody in your life or in the world who you'd love to share some gratitude with today?
It's an easy question because there's always people on my list, and it's a hard question because I have been so grateful for so much for so long. So I'll raise up my parents who raised me to be aware of all of the goodness that is in my life all the time. And it shows up in so many places if you're just, looking for it. So, it can be as easy as the big goofy dog, laying on the bed. It can be, the wonderful friendships that we've made at HPS with you and so many others. Yeah. My fabulous husband, my great parents, that I have a happy home. I mean, the list can just go on and on and on. And so I think the thing I'm most grateful for is that I was taught to be grateful.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, my gratitude today goes for who I dedicated this book to, my parents as well, who taught me by their own example, the meaning of loving kindness. And also that dog from Golden Retriever Rescue, Higgins, the Golden Retriever. Yeah. And I will put a picture of him in the Facebook chat here for you guys to join. Well, Gwen, it is great to reconnect with you, my friend, and to say hello to Big Zeph in the background there.
Yes, totally zonked out.
Yeah.
My classic introvert's like, I don't even care that mom's talking to people. Nothing bothers me.
And thanks to you guys at home for joining Spider and me on Dog Hugs, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Bye, you guys.
Thanks so much.